I dress like your idol Eddie Murphy because he's not coming. Your idol doesn't give a fuck about you, Kevin.
Three men, three distinct comedy eras, three different styles. And yet, somehow, every time they opened their mouths to do an impression, the room stopped. People just lost it. The professionals who had seen everything, cast members paid to keep a straight face, studio audiences ready for anything. They were all destroyed. We are talking about Kevin Hart, Eddie Murphy, and Bill Hader. Before you say anything. Yes, you have seen the clips. You have probably watched them on your phone at 2 in the morning, laughing until you cried. But I promise you, by the end of this, you will see all three of these men, in a way you never have before. Because the story behind why their impressions hit differently, the context, the stakes, the moments where everyone in the room physically could not function. That is what nobody talks about. Stay with me to the end. The final story here involves what happened live on national television when one writer decided to sabotage his own performer. It remains one of the most chaotic, hilarious, and genuinely unbelievable moments in the history of American comedy. Let us dive in. What makes an impression actually break people? Before we get into the legends themselves, let us settle something. You have heard impressions your whole life. Your uncle does a terrible Arnold Schwarzenegger at Thanksgiving. Your coworker has a mediocre Morgan Freeman that they bust out at every office party. So, what separates the impression that gets a polite chuckle from the one that completely breaks the room? Here is what most people do not realize. The best impressions do not just copy a voice. They expose something. A person's energy, their essence, their contradictions, and their most recognizable quirks. They amplify those qualities until they become a funhouse mirror of reality. The audience is not just recognizing the voice, they are recognizing the truth inside the impression. That is what makes it land like a freight train. Here is the real question I want you to sit with right now. Can you think of the last time an impression genuinely stopped you, cold? Not just made you smile, but actually made you grab the person next to you. Hold that thought. The three men we are about to talk about have each mastered that art in completely different and fascinating ways. Eddie Murphy, the original disruptor. Let us start where the story begins. It is 1980. Eddie Murphy is 19 years old. He has no business being on the cast of Saturday Night Live. That show had already seen its original legendary cast depart and was hemorrhaging viewers. The network was in crisis. The show was in free fall. Then this teenager from Roosevelt, Long Island walks in and starts doing impressions. We need to pause here because the word impressions does not do justice to what Eddie Murphy was doing. This was not just mimicry. This was total possession. His ability to capture the voice, the body, the physical energy, and the comedic contradictions of other celebrities was, and this is documented fact, unlike anything ever seen. On that stage before, Chris Rock, one of the greatest stand-up comedians alive, once said on the Questlove Supreme podcast that Eddie Murphy has an impression of KRS-One that is, and I am paraphrasing, spot on, and absolutely hilarious. Now think about that. Murphy's impression catalog is so vast, so deep, that even fellow legends are still discovering new ones. But let us talk about the impressions that did not just make people laugh. Those ones that broke rooms, broke careers, and broke expectations. The Stevie Wonder situation. Murphy started doing his Stevie Wonder impression as a teenager. By the time he hit Saturday Night Live, it was fully developed. He had captured Wonder's ethereal vocal tone, his positive spirit, and his physical mannerisms with frightening accuracy. But here is the part nobody tells you. His impression of Stevie Wonder was so good, so committed that the real Stevie Wonder showed up in a 1983 sketch, not to call Murphy out, but to compete with him. The sketch featured the actual Stevie Wonder trying to get a job as a Stevie Wonder impersonator with Murphy, playing the coach, showing Wonder how to properly imitate himself. Write that again. Eddie Murphy showed Stevie Wonder how to be Stevie Wonder. That is a level of audacity that has never been replicated, but even that was not Murphy's most explosive moment. The James Brown Celebrity Hot Tub Party, November 5th, 1983. This is the one. This is the sketch that became one of the most famous in the show's entire history. If you have not seen it, pause this video and go, watch it. Then come back, because the backstory is even better. Murphy appeared wearing nothing but a velvet bathrobe with Hot Tub Man number 1 written on the back, a wig and gold bikini briefs. He danced and sang around, inside a hot tub as James Brown. He channeled the godfather of soul, the gravelly voice, the rhythm, the raw energy. Even that famous inaudible mumble. The audience was losing their minds. Cast members struggled to keep a straight face as the sketch spiraled. Murphy eventually stripped down to a Speedo and dove in. Now here is the part that stayed hidden for years. Murphy later told the story to Jimmy Fallon on The Tonight Show. He revealed that James Brown actually loved the impression. He did not just tolerate it, he really loved it. Brown reportedly caught up with Murphy after they worked on a separate project. He told Murphy, and here is Murphy, doing his best James Brown voice, that he should play him in a movie. Murphy asked if people would just laugh at him. Brown looked him in the eye and said, "They will not laugh if you play it serious. They will know it is serious." In that same talk, Brown introduced Murphy to his daughter as a romantic prospect. He even told him to bury his money in the woods to hide it from the taxman. Only James Brown. Murphy could not commit to the biopic. He joked that his days of doing the splits were numbered. The role eventually went to the late Chadwick Boseman in Get On Up. Still, the fact that a legend wanted a comedian to play him proves how gifted Eddie Murphy truly is. And consider this. By the time Murphy was earning Emmy nominations, he was just a teenager in his first season. His influence became so deep that future Saturday Night Live cast members were held to his standard. Murphy's impressions were so sharp that the real stars began showing up to see them, which felt riskier. A live physical bit as James Brown, or standing next to Stevie Wonder and teaching him how to be himself. Leave your take in the comments. But now we have to talk about Bill Hader, the psychic impressionist. Hader joined the Saturday Night Live cast in 2005. Almost immediately, people realized they were watching someone rare. Not just a funny guy, not just a character actor. They were watching arguably the most talented celebrity impressionist to ever grace the Saturday Night Live stage. Read that again. Possibly the best in the entire history of the show. His range was staggering. Al Pacino, Vincent Price, Clint Eastwood, Charlie Sheen, Alan Alda, and so many others. It was not just the variety of voices, it was the pinpoint precision. Clint Eastwood himself saw the impression and spoke to E! News about it. He said it was good, and that Hader had him down pretty well. The man, who built a career on speaking as little as possible, used several words just to compliment Bill Hader. But there was one character that broke the cast harder than any other, thanks to a secret weapon. Stefon. Stefon was created by Hader and writer John Mulaney. He was a flamboyant nightlife correspondent who would show up on Weekend Update. He would describe the hottest, wildest clubs in New York City using the most surreal language possible. Here are some tips on what to check out from our city correspondent Stefon. The character became a modern legend, but Stefon held a dark secret. Because Weekend Update is live and uses cue cards, Mulaney had a unique advantage. He carried a nuclear weapon in his pocket disguised as a script change. Hader was a perfectionist. He told Howard Stern he got nervous and obsessively memorized his lines. Mulaney knew this. With the precision of a surgeon, he decided to go to war. Hader confirmed that Mulaney would write entirely new jokes on the cards right before they went live. Sometimes he kept the changes a secret until the moment Hader walked out onto the stage. Just enough to rattle him, not enough to help him. The result was Hader, on national television, fighting with every fiber of his being to stay in character. That signature move of covering his face and pressing his lips together, that was not a choice. That was Bill Hader, desperately trying not to fall apart on camera. And one night stands out as the hardest, broken. The night of the Sydney Applebaum incident. During a Halloween episode of Weekend Update, Hader was performing as Stefon, reading his cue cards. He expected the usual rhythm, rehearsed every beat. Then he flipped to a new card with fresh writing on it, words he had never seen. He shared the story with Howard Stern. The card read, "Hey Seth, you know how Black Ulas is the Black Dracula. Myers says yes. Then the punchline. Well, they made a Jewish one. You know what Jewish Dracula is called? The name on the card. Sidney Applebaum. Hader said he lost it. Totally. That kind of breakdown you cannot recover from for several seconds. The audience watched him unravel in real time. In that moment, that raw, unscripted live television disaster of a man defeated by a name, something magical happened. The audience was not just laughing at the joke. They were laughing at the total collapse of a professional. They watched someone get genuinely ambushed by comedy with nowhere to hide. This is why performers break rooms. It is not always about the impression itself. Sometimes it is about the person doing it. Later, when Harder left Saturday Night Live in 2013, his departure was described by many as a major blow to the Elaig show. Seth Meyers joked there was now a vacancy in the cast when Harder appeared on Late Night. Myers cheekily told him, "You were the impression guy at SNL, but you have Barry and other projects now, so I feel like I am the impression guy now." He then did quick impressions of Al Pacino, Vince Vaughn, and Michael Keaton. And Bill Hader, the man who spent 8 years keeping a straight face through Stefon's antics, could not stop laughing. He was undone by one word, by Seth Meyers doing impressions. The irony was perfect. By the time Harder left SNL, he was nominated for an Emmy Award for his work. On the show, the first male cast member to receive such a nomination since Eddie Murphy back in 1983. That is not a coincidence. That is a legacy. Bill Hader spent 8 years being systematically ambushed by his own writer. Would you have quit or would you have sought revenge? Let me know in the comments because your answer reveals how you handle chaos. Kevin Hart, when the student becomes the spectacle. Now Kevin Hart. Here is what is interesting about his relationship to impressions. He does not do them like Eddie Murphy or Bill Hader. He does not lock into a voice and disappear. What Kevin Hart does is something arguably harder. He embodies the emotional reality of a scene and then narrates the impression around himself. Oh my god, hey. He plays himself reacting to someone else, and the person he is imitating exists in the space between the words. Watch any Kevin Hart stand-up special and count how many times he mimics his father, his friends, his co-stars. He is not doing voices. He is doing personalities, and that is its own art form. The connection between Kevin Hart and impressions goes deeper than his own act. Kevin Hart grew up idolizing Eddie Murphy. He has said it publicly, repeatedly, without hesitation. Murphy is his blueprint, his North Star, the reason he does what he does. And this creates a fascinating dynamic because when you idolize someone that much, you do not just watch them. You study them, you try to be them, to understand them, to absorb their energy. Something remarkable then happened. The Netflix roast, May 2026. The roast of Kevin Hart was one of the most anticipated events in years. Streamed live on Netflix, it featured an extraordinary lineup. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Tom Brady, Cat Williams, and, yes, roast veteran Jeff Ross, who walked out onto that stage in a red leather bodysuit. A full red leather bodysuit. Because it was the exact outfit Eddie Murphy wore in his legendary 1987 special Raw. Now pause here, because this moment is layered. Jeff Ross, known as the Roastmaster General for his legendary performances across decades, chose to honor both Hart and Murphy simultaneously in that single visual. By walking out dressed as Murphy, Hart's idol, he was making a statement about who Hart aspires to be. Yeah, tonight, I dressed like your idol. Eddie Murphy, because he is not coming. Your idol does not give a damn about you, Kevin. While simultaneously using that aspiration as ammunition for a roast. It was a brilliant double-edged comedy. Sword. The audience caught it immediately. People who knew the reference, and plenty of people in that room felt the electricity of it. Hart himself had to process being roasted by someone who looked like the person he spent his life trying to emulate. Tonight, live all over the world, we celebrate the career of the legend Eddie Murphy. Tom Brady, making his roast appearance, took a different swing. He pointed out the roast had gone from Brady to Hart, noted his 7 Super Bowl wins against 2 ride-along movies, and called him the 3rd most famous person in Jumanji. Every word landed, but the moment nobody saw coming, the one that completely shattered the room, was Cat Williams walking out. Cat Williams and Kevin Hart had been feuding publicly. Williams had referred to Hart on Shannon Sharp's podcast as an industry plant. The fallout was messy, public, and real. And the moment Williams walked through that door, the tension in the room spiked. You could feel it. This was not just comedy anymore. This was the edge of something dangerous. That genuine, unscripted, anything can happen tension. That is exactly what makes the greatest comedy moments unforgettable. Because comedy without stakes is just noise. It is the danger that makes you lean forward. The Kevin Hart and the Eddie Murphy connection is alive. Earlier on, Kevin Hart's Sirius XM podcast, Comedy Goldmine's Heart, had a conversation with Murphy that tells you everything about how both men feel about the craft. Hart told Murphy, "Directly, Eddie, I do not like talking to you about stand-up anymore. I am not falling for the fuming trap. I am sick of you. I am sick of your stuff. Every time we talk, he leaves me with information, and I feel like I got cold." That is not admiration. That is reverence. That is a grown man, one of the most successful comedians on the planet, telling you that another man's words feel like gold to him. Murphy told Hart during that conversation that his original plan had been to do Dolomite Is My Name, return to SNL, do Coming to America, and then go back to stand-up. The pandemic shut it all down. Murphy is still building toward that return. And when he finally gets back on that stage, every comedian in the world, including Kevin Hart, will be watching. If Eddie Murphy returns to stand up for a full special, and this is genuinely on the table, what impressions do you want to see him do in 2026? Give me 3 in the comments. Go. The moments that broke everyone. A breakdown. Let us go one by one. These are the definitive moments where Kevin Hart, Eddie Murphy, and Bill Hader, through character work and sheer comedic presence, did not just make a room laugh, they shattered it. Moment number 1, Eddie Murphy and the real Stevie Wonder, 1983. This is one of the most surreal moments in television history. Murphy had been doing his Stevie Wonder impression long enough that it was a known quantity. And then SNL did the impossible. They booked the actual Stevie Wonder for a sketch where Murphy, as the coach, would critique Wonder's own impersonation of himself. Murphy's version was judged more accurate than Wonder's. The studio audience was struggling to process the scene. The layers of absurdity, a man being told he is doing himself wrong, were almost too much to handle. The sketch worked because it was anchored by Murphy's complete unblinking commitment to the bit. Moment number 2. James Brown's Celebrity Hot Tub Party. November 5th, 1983. Everything about this sketch broke the room. The costume, the choreography, the voice. Murphy singing an incoherent stream of funk-inspired syllables while dancing around a steaming hot tub in a Speedo. The Cape bit, a recreation of Brown's famous Cape stunt performed in a hot tub setting. The audience was gone within 30 seconds. James Brown's Celebrity Hot Tub Party from SNL featuring Eddie Murphy. Cast members were fighting to keep it together backstage, and then the revelation years later that James Brown had watched it, loved it, and asked Murphy to make a movie adds a layer of comedic poetry that could not have been planned. Moment number 3. The Sydney Applebaum incident. Bill Hader on live television. We have covered this, but let us sit with it for a second. A man who prepares obsessively, who has spent years developing his craft, who has delivered hundreds of live performances, was defeated by 2 words. 2 words, written on a cue card by a man who understood exactly how to dismantle him. The fact that millions of people watched, it happened in real time, and that haters' genuine, uncontrollable laughter was more entertaining than any scripted moment could have been, is the definition of lightning in a bottle. Moment number 4. Bill Hader on Late Night, The Return. When Hader appeared on the Seth Meyers late night show after leaving SNL, the dynamic had flipped. Hader was no longer the impressionist in the hot seat. He was the guest, the legend, the one who left. And then Meyers started doing impressions. 1 line for Pacino, 1 word for Vince Vaughn, 1 word for Michael Keaton and Hader, the man who had spent 8 years getting professionally broken by John Mulaney, who trained himself to stay cool through the wildest comedy attacks imaginable, yet Mulaney could not stop laughing. It was Meyers' night to shatter the room, and the guy he broke was Bill Hader. Moment number 5, the roast of Kevin Hart, where Jeff Ross dressed as Eddie Murphy. This one plays on multiple levels. Watching Jeff Ross walk out in that iconic red leather is funny on its own. Then you add the fact that Hart considers Murphy his idol, and Ross picked this specific look to roast him. That adds a whole new dimension. Beneath it all sits the unspoken question. The costume asks Hart, "How do you compare?" This was the most brutal roast joke of the night. It was not even a sentence, just a wardrobe choice. Here is what these 3 men share, and why it actually matters. You might assume Kevin Hart, Eddie Murphy, and Bill Hader have nothing in common besides being funny, but look a bit closer. All 3 use impressions not just as jokes, but as a form of emotional shorthand. Murphy uses impressions to shatter the myth of fame, to make giants seem human and therefore funny. Hader uses his to expose the gap between reality and the performance, between the person and the persona. Hart uses impressions of his father, his friends, and himself to be vulnerable, to bring the audience into his actual life. They are all documentarians. They do not just perform, they archive the energy of other people. They preserve what it felt. Like to watch James Brown move, what it sounded like to hear Al Pacino rage, or how Kevin Hart's dad looked when he said the wrong thing. And all 3 of them, at some point, walked into a room and broke. It not failed, but shattered, cracked the composure of everyone present, and let the light come pouring in. Bill Hader earned an Emmy nomination at SNL, the first male cast member to get that kind of nod since Eddie Murphy back in 1983. That parallel is not a coincidence. Murphy practically wrote the manual on what it takes to be a transformative SNL star. 35 years later, Eddie Murphy is returning to host Saturday Night Live. The fall lineup just dropped. Hader studied it, lived it, and then wrote the next chapter. And Kevin Hart, he is the chapter after that. He stands on the shoulders of both legends, looking toward a future where comedy is bigger than television, bigger than any stage where it lives on phones. Podcasts and streaming apps reaching corners of the world Murphy and Hader could never have dreamed of. The bigger picture, why impressions still matter. Think about this for a second. We live in a world where we can access more media than any generation ever. You can watch James Brown perform in 1968 in high definition. You can stream Eddie Murphy's 1983 special right now. You can watch Al Pacino in Scarface on your phone. You can watch the real thing anywhere. And yet Eddie Murphy doing James Brown, Bill Hader doing Al Pacino, or Kevin Hart doing his dad, these bits still break rooms. Why? Because a great impression is not a copy. It is a conversation. It is one artist saying to another, "I see you, I get you, and I love you enough to make fun of you." It is a tribute and a roast happening all at once. It is the highest kind of compliment dressed up as mockery. When an impression is so sharp, the real person asks you to play them in a movie, or when a room explodes, not just from the act, but from the impressionists' own uncontrollable laughter. You are watching something that goes beyond technique. You are watching two human beings collide, the performer and the subject, the art and the reality. The audience gets to witness it. That is why impressions matter. That is why they will always matter. Not because they are funny, though they are, but because at their core, they are acts of radical empathy. They are one person briefly becoming another and finding some truth in the process. The question that ties it all together. Here is where we land. Eddie Murphy, 19 years old, saving a dying TV show, doing impressions. So, accurate, the people he imitated wanted to hire him. Bill Hader, 8 years of live television, a writer. Trying to break him, every single week he would crack and crack and crack, but always find a way to recover. Kevin Hart, standing at his own roast, watching a man dressed as his idol, realizing in real time what it means to be viewed by the comedy world as someone who belongs in that lineage. Three men, three completely different eras of comedy, three different ways of making a room fall apart. Yet, all three would tell you the same thing. You do not do impressions to show off. You do them because you love the person enough to try. You have watched them so many times, soaked them up so deeply they just live inside you. The only honest thing to do is let them out. Now, here is the big question. I really want your answer in the comment section since I plan to read every single response. If you could see any comedian do an impression of any person living or dead, who would you pick and why? There are no wrong answers. I will be reading everything. If you made it this far, thank you truly. This video was a long one. The fact that you stayed means you love comedy as much as I do. Do click subscribe if you want more deep dives like this. Share this with someone who quotes Kevin Hart in their sleep, or someone who grew up watching SNL, and leave a comment, since the best conversations on this channel always happen right there in the comments. I will see you in the next one.